you ever heard someone talk about a problem or how frustrated they are, and they say, there ought to be a law against that? Or maybe, there is something that needs to be done, and you might think, why isn't the government working on solving that? These are situations that draw out attention to public laws and lawmaking. This video briefly discusses what legislation is and the different types of actions the legislature can take in Arizona. To begin, let's be clear about what we mean by legislation. We are not talking about decisions made by the governor or rules made by a state agency. Legislation is a decision made through a deliberative process by elected officials. Not all pieces of legislation result in the law changing. There are 6 types of legislation passed in the legislature. First is a simple bill, which is a proposal for a new law, an amendment to an existing law, or an appropriation. A bill requires the governor's approval. Second is a joint resolution, which is an expression of legislative will that has the force of law. This also requires the governor's approval. The third type is a concurrent resolution, which is an action the legislature can take alone, such as ratifying a federal constitutional amendment, proposing an Arizona constitutional amendment, submitting a referenda to voters, or authorizing a joint legislative investigation. The fourth type is a simple resolution, which expresses the opinion of one house. These are used to try to influence other bodies, such as the House or one of the state agencies, and is not binding as law. A fifth type is a joint memorial or concurrent memorial. This is an official statement of the state's position on a matter outside its jurisdiction or request for action by a federal agency. This also requires governor approval. The final type of legislation is a simple memorial, which is an expression of the position of one house, usually with the governor's concurrence. Most legislation is passed by a majority vote. People in state government sometimes make reference to the 16-31-1 rule. What this means is that nothing can be done in Arizona unless it is supported by 16 senators, 31 representatives, and the governor.
So I imagine that from the outside looking in, the complexity and all that's involved in trying to build a majority for whether it's the budget, which is the most complex thing we do, or just some simple issue, seems like it's more difficult than it should be. And the truth is, it's because we as a legislature, even though we are one branch of government, we are divided into 2 chambers. We have 30 personalities in the Senate and 60 in the House, and you have 2 different parties, all sorts of different constituencies. And so getting agreement is pretty difficult because people have very strong opinions about things, and they are representing a constituency that has very strong opinions about things. And it's not as simple as, you want a cheese pizza and you want a pepperoni pizza, so we'll just get half and half. If it were that simple, that would be excellent. But for the most part, you're dealing with far greater complexities, obviously, than that, but even just a wide variation of views out there. This place, the Arizona House, is where different worldviews, different value systems, different political ideologies all converge. And so it's very messy, and it can be very dramatic. So one of the challenges is that different people come from different worldviews, different political ideologies, different value systems, and all of those collide right here on the floor. And so people, they surround themselves with, usually with people that are like-minded, and so it's hard for them to perhaps fathom that there are other people out there with, in some cases, radically different views from their own. And yet in a democratic society, all have to work together. And so it's a messy process, it's a dramatic process, emotions can rise, tensions can rise, but it's something we have to work through. So it's not easy, and perhaps on the outside it's confusing to people why it's so hard to just get along. But when people are fighting for values that they really, really care about, and they are 180 degrees the opposite of others, you're going to have some difficulties working through it. until you can experience what it's like to interact with two other branches of government and colleagues across the aisle and different chambers in the case of the legislature and different layers of government, so city and county and federal, you can read it in theory, but it's just far more complex because what the text doesn't capture is personality in psychology and all of these things that make people people. And so when you're actually living it out, you see those firsthand and you just navigate. It's not totally different than a Thanksgiving meal with family members you don't see very often that you may not always agree with and trying to all get along. But it's something that obviously has huge ramifications for the state.
Laws passed by the legislature take effect 90 days after the legislature has adjourned. On that day, the law enforced by the government becomes the new law as changed by the legislature, not the law before the legislature passed the bill. This usually takes place midsummer. For example, on August 3, 2018, several new laws took effect, including establishing a minimum age for marriage, increasing the fee for registering cars, nullifying all non-English contracts, and extending the sell-by date for eggs. Emergency laws take effect immediately, but require a 2/3 majority to pass, a rare occurrence at the Arizona legislature. It is worth noting that a ballot proposition passed in 1994 made all tax laws emergency laws, therefore requiring a supermajority to pass. In addition, tax measures require voter approval at the next election as a ballot proposition. This means that cutting taxes only needs a majority vote, but increasing them is nearly impossible.